What is up, guys? Delboy here. So I just wanted to make a video on Anthony Yarde, his progress as a professional and where I see him right now. As I'm sure you guys all know, Anthony Yarde won last night against Tony Avalance. He won by a 7th round corner stoppage, I believe. And it was a fight where Yarde was always in control. It was a fight where he pretty much won every round. And it was a fight where he was always dominating kind of thing. But nevertheless, it was a fight where it kind of exposed a few of Yarde's defensive flaws and some potential openings for his opponents in the future. And it was one of those type of performances where he got the job done, but he didn't exactly look like $1 million either. I've been saying for a long time now about Anthony Yarde's defense, namely his shoulder roll. I think his shoulder roll is terrible, to be quite honest with you. He stands upright with his shoulder roll. He doesn't actually twist at the waist. He doesn't make an angle with his shoulder to deflect punches. His shoulder roll is it's like an Andre Berto shoulder roll. He's rigid, he's not really fluid with it, and even when he punches out of a shoulder roll, he just seems open for counters. You know, it's not a Philly shell, it's more of a bloody eggshell. His defense is porous, fighting the way he fights now. His shoulder roll isn't good, as far as I'm concerned. I've seen a right hand go over the top of that shoulder roll quite a few times now by low level opposition. If Tony Avalance is finding that chin over the top of your shoulder roll, God knows what a more accomplished light heavyweight is going to do, and especially one who can crack. You know, we've got guys like Barrera, who's got a great right hand, Dimitri Bivol, great right hand, Kovalev, great right hand. I mean, Yarde's defense against guys like that is a recipe for disaster. And the defensive flaws to me are plain to see. And I'm sure he can iron that out. He's like I said, he's got a lot of natural ability as an athlete. He can iron those out. But my worry is how durable is Anthony Yarde, because to me, looking at his career, it seems like they've actively avoided guys with high knockout ratios. Like any kind of threat. His level of competition has been pretty awful. I felt the Serge Locker fight was a decent little step up, but apart from that, it's been terrible. And you've got to ask yourself a question. Do his team know something that we don't in regards to his chin? Especially with a porous defense like that. I mean, it does make you wonder. I mean, why didn't they take the Hosea Burton fight? Hosea Burton is pretty basic, but what he can be, he is tall for the weight. He is kind of awkward, and he does have a little bit of power. Again, Hosea Burton is very tall. He's like 6'4" at light heavyweight, and potentially he could be punching over that shoulder roll and finding the target quite easily. Maybe that's the reason they didn't take that fight. Maybe they saw something in that fight that they just didn't like. But and they made some BS excuses why they never took that fight against Hosea Burton. You know, if you're going to follow through with those excuses about him not being worthy, then yeah, fair enough, you fight Serge Locker. But who would rather see Yarde versus Tony Avalance than Yarde versus Hosea Burton? Tell me that. What makes Tony Avalance more qualified than Hosea Burton? And you've got to go back to what Frank Warren and Team Yarde were saying about Hosea Burton. For them to then fight a guy like Tony Avalance, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder how much confidence they have in Yarde. Do they know something we don't? Defensively, like I said, he's open. That shoulder roll needs to be improved, or it needs to get dropped. And that's all there is to it. Because people, yeah, it looks pretty, it can fool some people. But listen, he's not going to get away with that above a certain level. Because if he tries that against a Kovalev, against a Barrera, against a Bivol, he is getting stopped, and he's getting stopped early. I'm not being harsh on Yarde, but I think defensively he's got a lot of improving to do. And I feel that Yarde and his team and Frank Warren need to rein it back a bit. I still feel this guy needs a lot more development fights. I don't think he's as far ahead as he thinks he is. And yeah, he just needs the right sort of build-up fights. He needs the right learning fights. He needs to be exposed to a wider variety of styles. And I feel that the next 12, 18 months, he's definitely not ready for a step up above European level anyway. He's not ready for that. So to me, Yarde needs to be fighting different type of guys who are going to give him different looks, who pose different problems for him. You know, if I was Frank Warren, I'd be looking at the likes of Bob Agersafe. You know, a guy who's awkward, he's herky-jerky. He's a southpaw, I believe. Defensively, he's quite sound. You know, he's got a box of tricks. They're the type of fights that are going to make Yarde better. Not fighting Tony Avalant, who doesn't really offer anything apart from toughness. You know, I feel that Yarde is being badly matched at the minute. I'm not sure how much he's improving. I'm not sure how good Tunde Ajayi is as a trainer. And I feel that I'm just not seeing the glaring flaws being improved at all. At all. I'm not seeing them getting improved. So I feel they need to slow it down a bit. Warren and Team Yarde need to relax on the hype. Again, I appreciate they have to promote him. They need to get him out there to a wider audience. I appreciate that. But when you're saying things about other fighters, talking about how they're not worthy, then surely your man has to do something at a certain level. And he's not been doing that. And the level he's fighting at, the flaws are obvious. To me. Defensively, he's not terrible defensively, but I just feel he leaves too many openings. You know. But he has a lot of talent. Offensively, he's good. He puts his shots together really well. He's got quick hands, like I said. He's a great athlete, power. You know, he's got a lot going for him. But I feel he needs a lot of fine-tuning. I feel he still needs a lot of build-up fights. I feel he needs a lot of learning fights. And maybe a new trainer. And I know he hasn't lost yet. I know people are going to say, what are you talking about? You don't know shit. But maybe we'll come back to this conversation in 12 months and you'll say I was right. But I'm seeing the same guy each and every time with minimal improvements. You know? A guy who is feasting on people who can't punch, who are not great movers, who are not great defensively. And all I'm asking is how's that progressing his career? How's that preparing him for a Kovalev, for a Bivol, for a Stevenson? Because these are the guys he's going to fight. He's not in a bum division. He's not in a barren division of nobodies. He's in a division full of killers, full of world-class talent. You know, let's list them all off. Kovalev, Stevenson, Bivol, Vodzik, Barrera. You know, there are some very good fighters at light heavyweight. And that's probably one of the reasons I'm kind of being harsh on Yarde, because ultimately his division is one of the strongest in boxing. So we have to kind of measure him against that. You know, like I said, this is not a division full of bums. There's plenty of great fighters in it, and I'm sure I missed a few. I mean, I missed Beterbiev, very good fighter. You know, he's not in a barren division, so we need to judge him accordingly, as I said earlier. And on top of that, you've got to take into account what him and his team have been saying. So we need to judge this guy at a high level, and I feel that the improvements are not obvious. They're not obvious to me. I'm not seeing the improvements. I'm not seeing. Did you see any improvement from the Sejloka fight to the Avalant fight? I didn't personally. And I'm not saying he's not going to improve in his next fight. I'm not writing him off at all. I think Yarde is a very good talent, especially considering he took up boxing quite late. He didn't have many amateur fights. I appreciate that. But we need to like judge these guys in context. And the context of that is he's in a strong division, and his promotional team and his own team are gassing him up beyond belief. So I'm just asking you guys a question. How much has he improved in the last 12 months? And is it enough? Is he improving quick enough to get to world level? That's my question. Where does he go now? Like I said, I personally feel he needs to stick at British level and try and get a few domestic fights. Like I said earlier, Bob Agersafe to me would be a great fight. southpaw, tricky, awkward, can counterpunch, quite tall at the weight, quite big at the weight. He's got that Ingle style. To me, Ajassafe would be a great opponent for Yard to fight next. You know, I think the Jose Burton fight again is still there. I'd still like to see it. Although I make Yard a significant favourite in that fight, Burton could potentially have things that will give Yard trouble. You know, the height and reach. You know, he's a harder hitter than anybody Yard's been in the ring with so far. You know, he's awkward at times. You know, this is a guy who is going to prove a bit of a different stylistic matchup for Yard. And they're the type of fights Yard should be taking. It's all well and good getting a phony ranking in a organisation, but if you're not getting the right fights in the meantime, you're in for a hiding to nothing. And I feel that's where Yard is heading right now. He's not getting the development fights. I've seen this happen before with British fighters. Hughie Fury is a good example for me. You know, he kind of started his pro career, fought the usual journeyman as you do, then kind of jumped British level, fought a couple of guys at the fringes like Rudenko and Cassie, guys who are okay, good learning fights, but you need more than that. And then he just jumps straight to world level against Joseph Parker and loses and comes up short and stinks the joint out. We've seen this happen before. Liam Walsh, another one, again, somehow got a ranking in the IBF, became mandatory, but never fought the necessary fights on the way up. Yes, Liam Walsh won the British title, but from that point, you need to be going to European, you need to be fighting fringe level, you know. He didn't do that. And he got exposed when the world level opportunity came up. Too many British fighters are skipping the necessary steps that they have to make. Let's look at guys like Billy Joe Saunders. Southern area, Commonwealth, British, European, Intercontinental titles. He won all of them on the way up. Then he becomes a world champion. You know, he went through all the levels. And in the long run, it was good for him. He got competitive fights early on against guys who came to win. Against guys who didn't just show up for a paycheck. Billy Joe took on his domestic rivals. John Ryder, who was undefeated at the time. Chris Eubank Jr., undefeated at the time. You know, Nick Blackwell, tough guy. He took all of these fights early on. He took his learning fights. He served a real apprenticeship to get to world level. And a lot of British fighters are not doing that right now. You know, they come in the game with either this Olympic pedigree or this social media hype, and they'll skip certain fights. They'll take fights that make them look good, but they won't take fights that necessarily develop their skills. Chris Eubank Jr. could be another good example of that. Again, he looks great against certain guys, but after the Billy Joe Saunders fight, you know, a guy who is slick, who's awkward, who moves a lot. Why wasn't Junior fighting another guy like that a few fights after? Yeah, fair enough, he needs his comeback fights. But why did Eubank Jr. fight Billy Joe? He loses the fight, and his very next, the next actual boxer he fought, who had a boxer style, who could move, was George Groves. That's a 4-year gap. In that 4-year gap, he never fought the style he struggled against. That's terrible matchmaking. Terrible. So, a lot of these British fighters, man, are not getting the fights they need. And Yard is going to be in that same position. I'm telling you, if it's going to go the way I think it's going to go, he is going to get knocked out by Kovalev, by Bivol, by Stevenson, whoever it may be. He's getting knocked out. That's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, because I want to see a UK guy do some good stuff at light heavyweight. I want to see Yard do well at light heavyweight, or Buatsi do well at light heavyweight. But I'm not liking Yard's chances right now. I know a lot of people are hyped up on him, but I think you guys should just ease off a bit. What do you guys think? Peace.